the first one is for Andrea. Is there a way that we can really remove the dependency on East Asia for chips manufacturing?
Short-term answer, no. I mean, if with a lot of money and a lot of time, maybe, but in the short term, no.
Okay. Next question is for Jacqueline. What are the most interesting applications that you've seen in decentralized manufacturing for defense use cases?
Testing. Okay. I would say in terms of like what's most interesting for the warfighter today is, to Will's point, being able to do things at the edge, having solutions that are modular, have multiple capabilities, and can be designed in kind of a cost-effective manner, have been fairly successful. And then, I think the whole deployment at the edge is a huge capability that is important for today's military as well as the future. So I would say that's probably the underlying most relevant, most important, critical capability.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And then the next question is, on the back of defense tech wave, how will venture investors exit businesses that are fundamentally designed to sell to governments? And then will defense contractors be able to be viable buyers for many?
Yeah, I think if you look at kind of the exit strategy for a defense company, you probably see a majority of these types of companies go through an M&A versus an IPO, and that can be a great exit for investors that are early into a company in terms of like their investment. So I think that what does like the future of defense look like? I think that having technologies that kind of can compete with the traditional practices of the defense primes almost puts them in a position to also innovate and find solutions. So I think it will continue to be relevant. It will continue to be important. An exit strategy is not going to be like a typical tech company you're going to see in defense. That's not the nature of the industry. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for the space to continue to grow.
Please, please go ahead.
Hello? Okay. One thing that I would really like to see defense VCs learn, which I think Decisive Point understands this really well because they come from this world, is that the defense industry is a components industry. These companies are getting onto programs of record, which is sort of like the holy grail. It's where you get your $100 million contracts, your $1 billion contracts, selling components or subcomponents that go onto a full system. But what VCs think that they're looking for is the full product. And that's the only way to make money, and that's the only way to exit. But like if you look at what Raytheon and Lockheed and Northrop Grumman's probably the only one that sells like a fully integrated system with their ARGM. But all of these multi-tens of billions of dollar companies are making billions of dollars a year in revenue selling components. It's a components business. I think VCs need to come around and start thinking that I want to invest in a business that's selling a component into a larger system because the government is giving billion-dollar contracts to just the components alone that are feeding into other systems. And that's a great exit because there's a company called Lore Holdings that's just a conglomerate of like 4 or 5 component manufacturers. And I think it's trading at a multiple of like 13x revenue right now, like a 5 billion valuation or something like that. So there's a lot of opportunities, but components, it's good.
Also, I guess maybe just for Will as well, whilst you have the mic, someone says this is absolutely awesome. How did you come up with this idea?
So my co-founder actually came up with the idea to start 3D printing rocket fuel. It started out with a hybrid technology where we actually separated a lot of the fuel. So like there's a tank that held this gaseous oxidizer, and then we printed this thermoplastic. And he had this vision of building a launch vehicle and launching things into space. And I was like, Ron, you're not a billionaire. Let's not compete against Elon Musk and do that. But there are only two companies building rocket motors for the defense industry. So let's go see what we can do in government. And so we actually started to make a lot of headway. We were lobbying ourselves. We were building these relationships. And another point that Jacqueline made is partnerships are really important. So we made an early relationship with Raytheon. I think we were actually their first off the book, like, or not off the book, like they invested in us, like not as a CVC. They didn't even have a venture arm, and they invested in us. So we started to focus on the defense side, and then started to just develop the propellant printing to where we were printing multiple versions of this fuel. So it was actually multiple types of engines just over several years. But I just convinced them not to go for space only. Let's go after defense. And that's how I got dragged into it.
Here we are. Nice. Okay, cool. For Edward, we have a question about, with the constant improvement in materials and AM methods, do you think it will ever reach price parity with traditional manufacturing for high volume, simple designs?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You know, the interesting thing is, if you just take plastic traditional processes, there's 20 different processes. There's 20 different traditional processes. For metal, there's 7 traditional processes. I think that, you know, what you're gonna find is that every process has its place. And what we've been looking for in general, of course, with volume, the more volume you have, of course, you get cost efficiency. So yes, the cost of parts from 3D is going down and down and down. Will it always match the cost of making a super simple design? I don't think so. You know, if you have a two-dimensional design in metal, that's sheet metal. It's sheet metal. Why would you intend to do it slower and more costly with an additive process? If you have a 2.5 dimensional design in plastic and it's functional, it's probably injection molding. You know, so I don't see these old processes being obsoleted by additive manufacturing. What I see is that they're going to be complemented by additive manufacturing. And yes, all the manufacturers, HP included, they understand they need to bring the price down, you know, and so they're working on, they're typically working on 3 different vectors: productivity, cost in and of itself, and repeatability. And repeatability is part of that, is actually part of that part cost analysis. Because if you have 70% yield, 70% yield sucks. 70% yield is not even close to a qualified process. And so they're generally pushing on all the vectors that will bring the price down, but it will be for more complex designs. And the more complex the design, the more competitively priced additive manufacturing is, even today.